This episode of the Accounting Insiders podcast is brought to you in part by Xero. Xero is a powerful cloud accounting software that improves efficiencies across your practice. With all client data stored on a single unified ledger, you and your clients can easily access and collaborate on the same set of books. Xero's advisor tools and automation solutions reduce time-consuming manual tasks and put data entry on autopilot. Work faster and more efficiently than ever before with Xero. Visit xero.com/accounting insiders to learn more. Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Accounting Insiders podcast. My name is Gary DeHart. I am the publisher of Insightful Accountant and the host of the Accounting Insiders podcast, where I just speak to accounting insiders. There we go. Put some air quotes out there. Just people from different walks of the profession to really stay current, see what's going on in the profession, and kind of see what people are experienced, whether it's from a consultant standpoint, which is where Will comes in, whether it's from trade shows. I'm doing a lot of interviews right now with the trade show producers to really give them an opportunity to say, hey, here's why you should come to our show. Here's what you'll learn at our event, as well as people, practitioners. So we're trying to get voices from all around the profession. And again, today is February 27th, 2025, and I like to throw a date in there so that if somebody's listening to this sometime down the road, you've got a date. And so if we say something and you go, hey, that's not true, well, maybe it was when we said it on February the 27th. But Will, thanks for taking a few minutes just to hop on here and have a conversation. And I'm going to get you just to give your own little quick bio, who you are and what have you done and what are you doing now?
Sure. Well, I appreciate it, Gary. And when you're talking about what date we're recording, it felt like there's a BOI joke coming in there somewhere, but maybe not. So anyways, so Will Hill, and been working with firms for, good grief, 24 years now. I'm not even
Getting
that
old,
old. How's
old
that
man.
possible? I know. Um, my wife has informed me not to look at the hair in the back of my head, and apparently there's
Well, at
just
least you
some
have
scalp
hair on the
showing
back.
there that didn't
You have
show.
some,
Yeah.
you have hair to look at, so you got that going for you.
Yes, yes. Uh, anyways, yeah, been around the tax accounting profession for 24 years or so, and just I have a blast with firm owners, because one, I know that they actually care about their clients. There's a lot of businesses that run and people care about their craft. They care about the money they make. Both those things are good, and nothing wrong with those things. But I really enjoy being around accounting firm owners because they want to see their clients succeed. It's genuine for the most part, and
Yeah.
it's just fun to help and be part of the journey with folks like that. So, I spent the better part of 20 years at Thomson Reuters. Did a lot with software implementation, did a lot with advisory services, and that sort of thing. And then I left, started my own consulting firm and helped firms. I like to say I live at the intersection of people and process, Gary, and help them work through some of their challenges that they're facing today.
Well, and that's two big legs on the stool, right? People and process, and then technology really is probably going to be the third one. But if you don't have the right people, it's not going to work. If you don't have the right processes, it might work, but it's going to be really clunky, right? And it is not going to be very functional. So when you go into a firm, what are some of those recurring challenges that you see? Because I mean, they're all doing, I don't want to be too general, but they're all doing basically the same thing, right? The same types of functions, firm
Sure.
to firm. What are the kind of recurring challenges that you see?
Yeah. So certainly right now, accountability on the part of the team is a challenge,
Mm,
right? Um, whether you're an in-office or a remote firm, I think we're facing a bit of a challenge right now with what's an acceptable level of productivity from team members. Um, how do we measure that?
hmm
How do we hold them accountable to what we think it is? Have we let them kind of slack off a little bit for the last, maybe not this last year, but you know, I would say right after the height of the COVID stuff. So I think there's a high level of productivity in 2020, 2021. Even though there's a lot of newly remote folks, there's a lot of focus, attention. There's needs that we were meeting on a real time basis with clients. So I think the productivity is very high. And when we exhaled from some of that 21 into 22, that's when, as I talk to firm owners, I see, yeah, I think our productivity kind of went down a little bit. And when we don't catch a decrease in productivity and we allow the decrease to become the new norm, it's really hard to kind of bring that level up again, especially just on its own, because now the staff are going, why do you want me to do more? I don't
Right.
understand.
Yeah, this is my
And
new norm. Yeah,
yeah,
25% is my new
this is the
norm.
new
Yeah.
norm. Right, right. And some places more extreme than others. And so, we're taking looks at what are what are the roles and responsibilities? How do we have conversations around focusing on productivity instead of hours? Those sort of things to help kind of shift things back to where they need to be, or to assess, is it possible to be where I think I want them to be, or is it not? And that goes right back to, what's our service mix? What's our client mix look like? And what are we trying to do as a firm? And what do
Mm,
the owners really want out of the business? And Gary, two firms can come to me facing similar challenges, have the same type of clients, personas, same number of staff, and the answers to their problems are different because they're trying to achieve two different things to their firm, right? So
okay.
we've got to think really about, what are we trying to achieve before we just jump into solution mode.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense because I mean, if you don't know where you're going, right, then you're going to get somewhere, and if you don't plan to get where you want to go, again, you'll get somewhere. May not be where you want to go, and
Right.
it may take you 10 times as long to get there as it should if you don't do that pre-planning on the front end. So, what are some of the tools that you use to help firms get more into that accountability mode and really tracking productivity? And it's funny, I'm glad I said the date of, February 27th, because this is about a week or so after Elon Musk put out his tell me the 5 things you did last week or you lose your job. Um, and yeah, like it or not, right, it's fair. What are you doing? Are you being productive? I'm paying you as a firm owner, I'm paying you, X dollars a year to do the work. Are you doing the work? But
Right.
what are some of those tools to help drive accountability and productivity?
So the first tool, Gary, is the language that we use,
Mm,
um, which is not very technical. It's not AI, right? It's the language that we use.
yeah.
And so in a lot of firms, I'm wanting leadership to stop talking to their team members about, hey, how many hours have you put in? And I want them to talk about, how many how many deliverables do we produce? How many client jobs do we finish?
Mm,
How many things do we start and move into the next stage of the pipeline? I want more of a production oriented conversation, because as we continue to look at, where do we find capacity, at some point technology becomes a factor, right?
right.
And a hurdle to staff adopting technology and doing things different is that their focus is on their hours. And if their hours go down to do the same amount of work, they're going to feel like they have to do more work. And so we're going to bet against ourselves in that conversation. So the
Mm,
first tool, language. How do we talk about things? We talk in terms of productivity. Clients, frankly, do not care how long it takes us to do our work. Is it done on time? And is it done right? That's
right.
what they care about. And ultimately, they would also care about, then, are they doing the right things as a client? Well, we don't know that if we're not doing things accurately, doing it on time, to put ourselves to have in a position to have those kind of conversations from an advisory relationship perspective, right? So that's the first piece. And the other tool, frankly, is, a lot of firms right now are evaluating their project management
Mm,
tools that they have. And I think there's a burgeoning element that we don't talk about much. I should probably write an article on this and do that sometime soon. I don't know if you know any publications where I could publish something, Gary,
Yeah, maybe,
but
maybe we might
maybe,
be able to
maybe.
find somebody.
You know, back in the day, back in the day being like the 2005 to 2015 kind of range, okay? Um,
Hmm.
Heavy push on single insight into project management and workflow. Where's everything for the firm? We don't want disparate project and task tools. We want one that we can see, right? It was the message in the marketplace, and it was the goal with a lot of firms. But recently, we've seen the advent of a lot more detailed tools that are focused. So, is it okay if I mention brand names here? I'm not affiliated
Yeah,
with
sure.
them, but yeah,
Absolutely.
okay,
Yeah.
cool.
Yeah, yeah. And
So,
even if
like,
you were, as
keep,
long as we just say, hey, I'm affiliated with
yeah.
that. But yeah, absolutely.
So, Keeper, for example, a
Yeah.
very growing popular app with month-end close, right? And one of the things that firms love about it is the depth of task detail that's there so they can see what's in there and we can complete steps. We've got really good visibility inside of Keeper. Well, if I've got another main project management tool, now my question becomes, what level do I set up a just a generic project, but then the tasks are over there? Do I find a way to link the two? Can I link the two? Do I
Hmm.
care anymore? And now, as we look at what's going on with the growth of um, electronic organizer capacities, whether it be out of tax tools or out of document request tools, right? Lisio is growing what they're doing on their document request and dynamic organizers. SafeSend is doing some more work on the gathering side as well. And there's a couple other early stage tax production type tools that now really have workflow built in because they're part of the document request procedure. And so if we can request documents, why can't we track where you are through at least the first half of the process until we come to the e-filing side? Maybe that's three-quarters of the process, whatever. But so now all of a sudden, what do I do with that against my main workflow, right? So I think this is a really interesting element of firms that are using some of these key technologies that have really good task detail depth, but don't span services. But if the
Hmm.
firm spans services and client span services, now we have to ask ourselves, do we care anymore that they're in separate places? Is that okay? And some of that comes back to roles and responsibilities. Like the answer is different, perhaps for different firms. I think it's an interesting element of what's going on from a workflow and capacity perspective out there, Gary.
Yeah, and we use HubSpot, and it's funny you say that. So we use HubSpot, and in HubSpot, and we're a relatively new user to it, but HubSpot you can assign tasks. HubSpot also has campaigns, and within campaigns you can assign tasks to people on the team. But those tasks that you assign don't show up in that first task list, which is kind of goofy.
Mm-hmm.
HubSpot also has projects, which is very similar to campaigns, but the same thing. If you build out a project in HubSpot and add tasks in that project, it doesn't show up in the other task list. So you have to go to, talking about disparate places, you have to go to three places if you're doing three different things to see what all your tasks are. Um,
And,
but you brought up a
and for
really good
some
point,
firms,
and
that's awesome.
yeah,
Others, it's terrible, right? And that's where the
right, kind of,
dynamic of the individual firm really matters.
yeah, and that actually, I like what you said because you said, it may depend, each firm's different, right? And kind of looking at our situation, you know, maybe it doesn't matter if those are in three different places for us, as long as there's somebody responsible for the task, somebody responsible for campaigns, somebody responsible for projects. Don't know. It's
Hmm.
it's something that's worth looking at, right, from our perspective.
Right.
But would certainly flow over
Yeah.
to a firm that's trying to decide, hey, do I go with an all-in-one package, which probably isn't going to solve my problem, or do I find the best solution and go with multiple solutions. And that's part of what you help them try to figure out. Is that part of what your
Yeah,
role is too?
yeah, I do that for a number of firms. Yeah.
Okay, great. And so, what's the biggest challenge, or how do you get firms to impact these changes? I mean, it's easy for me to say, yes, I
Yeah,
know I need it. Yes, you know it will.
yeah,
You're right. Come on in. Let's do this. And then it's time for you to do it. And I have 19 other fires that
right.
just started. How do you impact that and keep them moving and bought in?
Two areas. First, you have to recognize that every change is bi-directional. It's got two directions. It's got the pain we're leaving, and it's got the purpose that we're chasing, right? And so I need to be clear on what pain are we leaving. Now, sometimes that pain is I'm missing an opportunity, right? It
Hmm.
isn't always that we're doing something and it's falling apart. Sometimes it's we're missing an opportunity, so we've got to solve that pain. And then what's the purpose that we're chasing after? Hey, we're trying to secure 10 more hours of admin time a week through technology as opposed to man hours. Okay, fine. That's what we're chasing after. Or we're trying to increase throughput of 5 more returns per week in the preparation side. Okay, great. We know what we're chasing after, right? I got to know
Hmm.
both because when we go to push into the change, difficulty is going to happen, right? Something is going to come up, and I need to make sure that I'm have that motivation both directions. No, we can't just go back to the way it was. You got to remember the pain, and yes, what we're chasing is worth the effort that we're putting into this change. So
Yeah.
recognizing and communicating around the bidirectional nature of change, I think, is important. The second one is really transparent communication. I can look at a firm, have some conversation with firm owners, and know fairly quickly how successful change is going to be based on how transparent they're willing to be with their team, right? And there is correlation between the more transparent we are, the more successful the change will be because greater
Hmm.
transparency gives me greater access to the staff's discretionary effort. Less
Okay.
transparency limits the staff's discretionary effort, and I need their discretionary effort when we're going through change.
Right. Yeah, and I imagine, I mean, so that helps with their buy-in too, right? I mean, the more that, if I'm a staff member, the more I can see the point and the purpose of what we're trying to do and how my change impacts the bigger picture because there is
Mm-hmm.
transparency, that helps me, buy into what you're doing or what we're trying to
Yep.
implement. And you got to have buy-in, right? I mean,
Yeah.
anybody can
Mm-hmm.
sabotage it along the way if they're not bought in.
Yeah. And a lot of times sabotage is not intentional.
Right.
It's
Yep.
it's just a hey, when I feel that I'm at risk as a person because I see this change coming and there hasn't been enough communication on why or enough clarity on what's going on, I just feel like, wait, someone's coming after me, my safety is at risk, and so I'm going to respond defensively. And a lot of times that's subconscious, Gary. It's not intentional
Right.
because they're mean, nasty people. It's my fight or flight kicks in this particular way out of defensiveness, and it creates saboteur type of activity. And we sit and we want to point the finger at them, and we have to step back and go, why are they acting that way? What have we
Right.
not communicated well? How do we change that with our habits and patterns?
Right. That's a good point. So, is there anything, so we talked about kind of the recurring challenges and how you go about it. What's kind of what's the biggest hurdle? Like, again, we're assuming you're already working with the client. Like well, actually, let's look at both. Trying to bring a client on board to get a client to say yes to your services. What's typically the biggest hurdle for that?
Um, they have to want to. I
Hmm.
what I could talk to any number of firms, show them where they're having some challenges, and say, "Let me help you out." But to fix a problem, you've got to be a little bit fed up, and you got to want something different. If
Yeah.
you just want the same, but you want it better for other people in your firm, but you don't want anything to change for you, you're probably not going to go ahead with my services, right?
Right.
I also think that you have to be willing to listen to the outside, right? Some would say, hey, Will, you're not a CPA. Are you sure you can help these firms? Well, one, I've physically been in over 400 of them. I've seen a lot of firms over the years work through a lot of transition and change.
Hmm.
But I'm kind of glad I'm not because it allows me to make sure I'm in my lane. And I want my clients to be comfortable to be fully in their lane as, hey, we know what we're going on, what we're doing from a technical end. We know the concerns we have to have from uh, the perspective of the law and regulation and all those kind of things. And they've got to say, I'm willing to supplement my knowledge when it comes to change management, when it comes to having an outside eye on process improvement, that sort of thing. It's not that they're bad at those things, but those are the areas where they have to say, hey, I don't know it all, and I'm willing to have an outside eye. And if you want to
Right.
be right all the time, I'd rather go talk to someone that wants to listen.
Right. Yeah, there's tens of thousands of firms, right? So there's a handful of people that need your services. Is the does it come down to money very often? It sounds like it's not really a money issue. I mean, because I think the size firms you deal with are typically a little bigger than the solopreneur, right? Um, so
No, I
they
actually have a couple pure solopreneur firms
oh,
that
do you really? Okay.
with like a part-time admin that work with me right now.
Okay.
Um, so usually money is not the concern.
Hmm.
Um, really, it's just about what am I trying to achieve, and am I willing to do something different?
Right. Okay. That's yeah, we and always come back to us in conversations like this because as I have these conversations and you say some things, I'm like, yep, we should be doing that. Yep, we should be doing that. Yep, we need to have very clear, defined roles. I was sending one of our guys, so we have two people in the Philippines who work with us, and was just sending one of them a note this morning, like, who actually does X? I should know this, but I don't, right? Who does that? And the worst answer would be nobody, right?
Right,
So
right.
hopefully the answer comes back that it's either him or the other guy. Um, what are you seeing let's stay on that small firm for a moment, that solopreneur for a moment. So when you work with firms like that, it's are you finding that it's more about, hey, these technologies are what's going to make you two work together most effectively, or um, are you kind of looking from start to finish in what they're doing and reevaluating everything?
It's it's really much more holistic. So the smaller the firm I work with, sometimes almost the less technology emphasis that there is, right?
Mm, okay.
And no matter the size, it, and typically the firms I'm working with in a coaching relationship are 20 staff and under. When I get into firms that are 20 plus, we're typically working on a specific workflow and it becomes more technology oriented at that point.
Okay.
But the smaller firms, from the coaching perspective, it really starts with what do they want to achieve, and saying, hey, if I've got a certain goal and I'm not on track to make it, what do I have to change? When is it the right time to hire in? Sometimes it's
Mm,
when is it the right time to change services? It could be a matter of, hey, I'm talking to a bunch of other firms. You're probably underpriced. How do we make a transition, even in your pricing? And what does that look like? How do we monitor that progress and make sure it's having
mm,
the result you're looking to have it make as we go through? So it is extremely variable, again, based on what does that owner want to achieve? That's so critical.
okay. So that's almost like the last part of that, almost more of a coaching than I don't know if, I think there is a difference here. It's almost more of a coaching than a guide, right? It sounds like a
Hmm.
lot of the first stuff you talked about is a lot more guidance, right? And hey, let's get let's get things lined up and let me help you get things lined up. And then that second is more of, hey, where is it that you're trying to get to so that we can then work on getting things lined up. Um,
Yep.
is there, like when you go on to either of those, whether it's small or large, do you end up breaking the project down into we're going to work on one task or one of these goals at a time, or are we working on multiple things kind of concurrently?
That depends on the firm, Gary, and how I start with the firm.
Okay.
So some of the larger firms will start by trying to solve one particular problem, and then we'll break that into some stages. And sometimes that problem we're trying to solve is, which problem do we solve first? Because we identified five or six. And so we're trying to
Yeah.
wrestle through prioritization and all those kind of things, right? Typically with smaller firms, we just take a kind of executive coach mentality towards it. Say, let's put all things out on the table. What are you trying to get to? What are the hurdles? All right, let's go. Let's look for inertia to where we can and positive inertia where we can capture
Yeah.
things that are going well and use that to help us solve some of these challenges. And we'll be in and out of different challenges because in a firm that has a total of less than 10 FTEs, it's really hard to separate any one thing to stand on its own. They're all extremely interrelated. And so we have to be able to approach it holistically.
Okay. And do you get into, and this date goes to another conversation I had earlier this week, do you get into kind of the front end, like the client facing side, like client acquisition, or is it once we're inside the walls, so to speak, of the firm?
Um, so I don't get into marketing per se, but
Okay.
yes, we will get into client acquisition. We'll talk about what is the strategy. Again, goes back to the goals. It's
Yep.
some firms, pardon me, that don't want to grow, but you have to focus on client acquisition, else you become stagnant. And right, and I don't want stagnancy to equal not growing. I want to not necessarily grow if I'm trying to protect certain work-life balances and hours
Right.
commitments. Um, but I can't have a stagnant firm in the midst of that. So I still have to be growing in terms of how or evolving in terms of what we're doing, types of clients, the needs that we're meeting. If we become too stagnant and focus on just turning away all business, we're going to have trouble if we want to go turn that water spigot on later. It's going to be much more
Right.
difficult. We're going to find ourselves behind a whole heap of other challenges. So,
Yeah. And if you,
whole
yeah,
heap
if you
is a
ever want
very
to,
technical word.
yes, that's right. And if you ever want to sell the firm, you're going to have a whole heap of challenges, right? Because you haven't been,
Yeah.
like you said, stagnant. That's a great word.
Hmm.
Because if you're, who wants to buy a
Yeah.
stagnant business? Yeah, nobody, right? Well, there might be people that
Right.
do because they see some opportunity in it. But do you have an ideal client like avatar?
Um, so for the coaching relationships, I like to find a firm that is one or two partners, 20 or less FTEs. We can whether that's just the partner on their own and admin all the way up to 20. We can really help make some things happen. And if
Yeah,
you just feel stuck, right? If you're feeling stuck, you're like, oh, I'm stuck. I don't even know how to describe it. Not sure where to begin. Let's have a chat. Let's have a chat.
okay.
So
Yeah, well, and how would that chat happen? How would people reach you?
yeah, so I'm fairly active on LinkedIn. Find me out there, and
Yeah,
also my website, willhillconsults.com. My email address, will@willhillconsults.com. And, just anybody that wants to have just a half hour, 45-minute chat through the struggles, no sales pitch, just chat. If it's helpful, then we'll have another chat. If it's not, then we don't need to have another chat. So,
right. Yeah. Yeah, and I find that any kind of conversations typically helpful, especially someone who has industry knowledge, right? Yourself, who has been into all these different firms and has seen how things can work really well and has also seen how things don't work really well and what can cause a firm not to function well and solutions to help you move from not functioning well to being a well-oiled machine. So that's a generous offer. Certainly, we'll have that in the show notes that people can certainly reach out to you. And when you come up with that article you thought about, write it up. We'll put it out there. Um, yeah. Anything in parting? Where will people find you physically? Because I know you do some speaking at shows.
Yeah,
Where are you going
so
this year?
I'll this year I'll be at AICPA Engage. Speaking there, I'll be at the Right Now conference in May in Nashville. Um, and I'll be at the Digital CPA show in December. And I think there's a couple other things, but those are the
Uh,
ones that stood out in my mind right now,
yeah.
Gary.
Yeah. Yep. And there's always change. I know. I think last year, were you did something with Minnesota last year, didn't you?
Yep, did a few
I
things with
think I.
Minnesota Society last year,
Yeah.
and we haven't worked out our calendars yet for this year, but yeah,
Yeah.
great folks.
Have you ever done anything with the Georgia Society?
I have not. I
Hmm,
have not.
okay.
I would love to.
Because
I have not.
the guy, this guy named Greg Wilder, I don't know exactly his title, but he's in our scout troop, so I should introduce you to. Um,
Yeah,
yeah, I'll do that via
great.
email. So never know, right? All right. Any parting thoughts, last words? I'll give you, well, I won't give you the last word because I have to close it, but last thoughts.
Just don't be afraid of making some changes. If you just sit there, the change that will happen isn't necessarily the change that you want. So go after it.
I like it. All right. Well, great. Will, thank you so much for spending a little bit of time with us today. And I know we do have an upcoming practice management talks, which Will and I'm sorry, Julie Smith and Will Hill co-host that for us every other month. It's a 30-minute practice management oriented um, webinar. So look for that on insightfulaccountant.com. And we will talk to you very soon. Appreciate it.
All right. Thank you, Gary.
Thanks. All righty. Bye bye.